Okay, so I'm about to close the poll and we can begin, but yeah, we've got a pretty even split between people who work in industry who are outside of quality and regulatory affairs right now, so not in those functions, postdocs, and grad students. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Right. Okay, and we will jump into our session. So again, good afternoon. Welcome to the Scismic Career Development Panel session. Today, we are going to be talking about how you move into the regulatory and quality departments within a biopharma company or a med tech company. So within the life sciences. What that career trajectory looks like, what are the opportunities there, and what a day in the life of an individual within this, what is that like? And so without further ado, I would like to jump into a little bit about Scismic, and then I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to go right in and give them an opportunity to tell you about themselves. But very briefly, Scismic is a company that helps life sciences professionals navigate their career path. So whether you're coming in directly from academia and transitioning into industry, any of the life sciences sector, or you're currently within your role already in industry and you're looking to see how to move into different functional units, how to move into, how to kind of climb up that career ladder, we are your guide to your career trajectory, career path in the life sciences. And we do that through a few ways. We have our job matching platform where as a job seeker, you go up there, you fill up a profile. We work directly with hiring managers and companies that are hiring. They put in job descriptions, and we have special technology that essentially extracts keywords from your profiles and keywords from your job description and matches them in a way that synonyms match. So the matching is very precise. So it really helps you streamline your job seeking process. And we are tailored for the life sciences industry. So we are really only putting on jobs that are probably very relevant to you in your skill set. And today we are really happy to welcome two of our esteemed panelists. So we have Anthony Watson, who's had a long, solid career in regulatory affairs and recently quality. And I will jump into having him tell us about his career path in a little bit. But he's currently at WindGap Medical, and I believe WindGap develops medical devices. And we also have Poonam Sharma, who's had an equally successful career in kind of the quality stream, but I believe Poonam started from the research sector. So really interested to hear how she made that transition and why she made that transition. And she's within the cell therapy and tissue engineering space. So with that, I will let Anthony, Tony, you can start with a little bit about yourself and how you kind of came about to where you are today.
Thank you, Danica, for inviting me to participate in this panel. So altogether, I've been involved in medical devices and combination products for almost 30 years. 20 years at FDA. I was a reviewer there. I was a branch chief. I was a division director. Got into combination products, digital health, human factors, joined industry in biotech, Biogen in 2013. Built a medical device regulatory affairs team there, left there and went to Sanofi, did the same thing there. And both of those different companies are quite different in the way they operate, but have some similarities as well. I was at Pear Therapeutics for about almost 2 years. Pear Therapeutics develops digital health interventions and particularly prescription digital therapeutics. Unfortunately, Pear Therapeutics I went bankrupt last year. I joined WindGap Medical. At WindGap Medical, we make combination products, specifically drug delivery technologies. And in both of those last two roles, I had quality within my scope as well. So that's where I am here.
Thank you, Tony. Poonam, we'll switch to you for a little bit, and then we'll move into some of the kind of key aspects of the panel session.
Good day, everyone. Thank you so much, Danica. I'm very delighted to be here. and welcome you all for today's webinar, which is focused on the quality control and regulatory guidelines. Little bit from myself, I'm working in the quality for about almost 17 years and work across diverse product lines. I started my career from the food industry and then moved to the medical device and then moved to the dietary supplements and moved to the medical microbiome field, and now I'm in the cell therapy. So very interesting journey. And also I used to work as a research scientist, and now I'm working as a quality head. So in today's webinar, we are going to discuss a couple of things that how do you transition from R&D to QC roles or feasibility moving across different product lines. I'm excited to share my thoughts and answer your questions. So thank you.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, thanks. Sorry about that. A quick start to kind of setting the stage. Thank you for the introduction, both of you. The biggest question, I mean, when I kind of I was in R&D for a long time and kind of moved out of that to explore some different career options and starting Scismic. And my first point of confusion many years ago, what's the difference between quality and regulatory? How do they sit within an organization? What do those functions do? And then quality control versus quality assurance. So kind of the three things, how do they differ? Where are they similar? And, why are they often lumped in the same category? Any one of you?
Well, I'll defer the quality control versus quality assurance question to Poonam, because honestly, quite frankly, I haven't dealt very much with quality control in any of my roles. I'll just put it this way, and then I'd love to hear what Poonam has to say about it. I look at quality and regulatory as two sides of the same coin. Both of them are regulatory. Sometimes you hear people, I don't know if you've had this experience, Poonam, people sometimes can say regulatory and they mean quality. They kind of lump them together. When they talk about regulatory, they talk about regulatory affairs and quality assurance and quality control all in one big lump.
You're right.
And is that how you've seen it in your experience too?
Yeah.
So I would just say, they work very closely together, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But I look at them as really two sides of the same coin. Both of them are working on regulatory actions and activities and compliance, but they're focused in different parts. So I'll stop there, and Poonam, please, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, without quality control, quality assurance, and regulatory, you cannot release the product in the market.
Absolutely.
So quality control and quality assurance work very close to each other, but have distinct roles and responsibilities to ensure the product quality. QC focus on the testing and inspecting products to ensure that they meet the specific standards. They focus on the instrumentations, if the raw material is coming in, they are okay to use, the quality standards, the audits, the QC focus on that. Meanwhile, QA is more about managing the overall quality process. It involves creating the QMS system, the procedures, the policies, and the SOPs, if the quality control are using the approved SOPs or not, if the specifications are set and can be used to consistently produce high quality products. And QA also aims to prevent the quality issues before that happen, rather than just identifying them. Like, okay, QC take care of the deviation and kappa and OOS and OOT, but at the same time, QA definitely oversees them and make sure that all the documentations and all the investigations are under the compliance and follow the guidelines of the quality. They have different tasks, like QC provides the data that helps QA make decisions about the overall quality process. QA sets the standard, QC follows it. So make sure the testing and inspection meet the regulations and company standards. Also, QA checks if the procedures are effective. I mean, if the QC are revising it, if the quality control analyst using the approved procedure, effective procedure or not. So all these comes under the QA, but also QC help to look over that we follow all the procedures and guidelines that QA decided and QA set up all those.
So would you say, to summarize and put it oversimplistically, QA is almost a bit more process driven and QC is a bit more product quality driven?
Yes, you can say that. QC focus on testing and
Mhm.
QA focus on the whole quality process.
Got
That
it.
includes the manufacturing, sometimes R&D, and the quality control.
Okay.
And could I comment on that as well?
Mhm.
So that totally squares with what I understood as well. And in some small companies, you may not have QC broken out because, for example, when I was at Pear, we had a group called Software Quality Assurance. And what they really did was they tested the product. They created test protocols. They actually tested the product before it went out the door. They were separate from the rest of the quality system group and the people who are doing, procedures and processes and work instructions and things of that sort. But they were really focused on making sure the product met all the requirements before it went out the door. And so I think, you could have a QC function that isn't called QC. It may be doing something like QC. So, just to be aware of that. And from the biopharma perspective, I mean, what I found is that the regulatory and quality functions are separated functionally. If you go up, for example, if you go up the line, it may not be so much in the smaller companies, but in large biopharma companies, quality has a head different than the regulatory head, and they're separated all the way up, sometimes all the way up to the CEO. So in the smaller device companies, you find regulatory and quality come to a common head. Like in my organizations, both of those groups come to me, but in other companies, you might find them separated and they don't have the same, they don't report to the same head.
Yeah, it's definitely different setup for the different companies. I mean, I sometimes worked under the head of the manufacturing. I know that's a conflict, but
sometimes that's the way it is, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I worked in the numerous startups that witnessed a journey. I also witnessed a journey from the research. Then we approved obtaining the FDA EU approvals and then ultimately release the product into the market. And then when the startups, they don't have these departments split up. So you wear so many hats. So
Right.
I did also worked as a QA and quality control, both for some of the startups. And then they split up when we had to release the product in the market.
So the take-home message I'm getting is you can't don't take it for granted that these particular terms may mean kind of these very separate things, and to read more into the job description. If I was someone looking to see, for a particular type of role, you really do have to read the job description to understand specifically what that particular role in that particular organization is looking for, has set up their
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Exactly.
Okay. Maybe this one for Poonam to start off with, but can you tell us a little bit about your transition from the R&D into kind of the quality division? How did that happen? Why did that happen? Like, what was your thought process, and then how did you put that into action? How did you end up or get to this stream?
Honestly, I didn't do it. That just happened. So, but I loved it. I would suggest or like one effective way that I can give you that from R&D to QC is gaining the hands-on experience in the QC. I worked in the R&D and I had good technical knowledge of the instrumentation, of the assays. That then when I moved to the QC, there is some of the guidelines or documentation that I had to learn. Like in R&D, you never write it down, the materials. You don't worry about the calibrations. You don't worry about the equipment maintenance. But in QC, you have to, before you start the assay, you have to gather materials, write down the lot numbers, expiration date, make sure everything, you have the approved SOPs, you need to have a specs before you perform the quality assay. In R&D, you can just go ahead and start doing your assay. And if you think that that's not working, you can change it. In quality control, you cannot change it. If you change it, that's a deviation.
Mm.
So definitely gain,
Mindset.
yeah, mindset, mind's quality. So think about it, just that if you're not going to write it down, you will not remember after 2 years. In R&D, we don't realize that, but when you move to when you gain more experience, you will like, oh, I would have write it down, so I would remember that now.
Mm. For
So,
some of the,
yeah,
for both of you, kind of actually following up from that, for both of you stepping back and looking at some of your more junior members of the team, those who have just started maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years within that time frame, what does a day-to-day, what does a day in the life of someone who's kind of entering regulatory affairs and quality control look like? What are they doing from 9 to, I don't know, 5:30 or 6 or whatever the work balance is like?
yeah, in the quality control field, yeah, it's a quality control. It's very dynamic. We have schedules that like, okay, you have to do the testing today. Tomorrow you are scheduled for this testing, but that can change anytime. It depends upon if something happened, if something comes up, or the product or the assay did not work, then there is a deviation, and then you have to repeat the testing, and we had to release the product. So there are always the deadlines and always working very hard.
Who is kind of requesting the testing in that sense? Who are you working with?
So manufacturing develop the product. And as soon as they develop the product and release the product from their manufacturing sites, we got that, okay, production is released, production is over. Now it's a quality control responsibility to test and release that in the market. As soon as we got the lot or any drug product or any microbiome product, any medical device, we started working on that final drug product release assays, or what are the visual inspections are going to be. There is a labeling inspection. So different types of many inspections before we release the product in the market, and they go by, and then after that QA responsibility came over.
Yeah, and I'd say,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead, please.
In regulatory, and I think like regulatory affairs as well, it varies depending upon what the size of the company, what the products are, how many products there are, what activities are occurring in the company. For example, when I was at, I'll use Biogen as an example. I was medical device regulatory employee #1 at Biogen. They did not have any medical device people. They were working on combination products that were drug delivery systems. So I was to build a team of people that had that background inside this biotech company that was producing, biodrugs, basically biological drugs. In that day, my first year was being a consultant. They just come to me and ask me questions, what about this? What about that? I didn't have an infrastructure to support me. So I had to build an infrastructure and then bring in team members that supported covered my weaknesses in areas I did not know, like drugs, for example, to help me build that combination product team. When I got to Sanofi, it was a much larger company, they had a medical device infrastructure within that company, but we had responsibility for all the medical devices throughout the entire company. So we had over 200 devices at Sanofi. So it was every day you were working on something different. Sometimes we were working on a class 3 implantable device, and other times we were working on a drug delivery system that had a digital app associated with it. So we were always doing something different. Submissions, we might be working on submissions. We might be working on an early project where we're just trying to understand what the project is and giving early guidance to a development team to help them understand what they need to do from a regulatory standpoint.
So Tony, can you give us a bit of insight into what that team looks like? So when you say, what does that regulatory unit look like that kind of gives, communicates with the manufacturing R&D teams or whoever that team you're interacting with? What does that unit look like? Do you have like an analyst? Do you have like a senior consultant? What does that unit look like?
So the overall, and again, these are very different types of, depending on the company, but let's take Sanofi, for example. Sanofi had a very large, I think at one point, Sanofi had 1,800 regulatory affairs people. And the way they were organized regionally. So each region would have their own regulatory affairs group that reported up to a global group. My team, because we were a medical device team that handled all the devices from the company, were the global medical device regulatory team. So we communicated with the different countries around medical devices that were in their countries, but we had a common regulatory strategy for the devices. And that's true of the drugs too. The development process is very different for drugs from devices in terms of time and the type of way the products are developed. But the way the communication essentially worked was you had a global group that sort of set the overall global strategy, communicated with the different countries, provided common documents that all the countries would work with, and then we would interact with the development team who was developing a common product, right? You might make changes in labeling throughout the different countries. You might have different tweaks here and there, but the product isn't going to be different in every country. It's going to be one product, especially in the drug world. It's going to be one product that every country has to adapt to essentially. So that team is essentially, that global team might have a team that works on submissions. They might have a team that's doing nothing but policy and regulatory intelligence, that isn't gathering information on the regulations that happen globally. You might have another group that's specifically working on the development side. They're working directly with the development teams to make sure the right standards and guidelines are included in the product, and they're communicated to quality, for example. So they're working with the quality team, for example, to make sure that those are aligned. So in larger companies, you'll find these different functions within regulatory. And smaller teams, like my groups in the last couple of companies I've been in, we do it all because there's no one else to do it. We're not big enough to do it that way. But generally, you can have those different functions within those organizations, and that's how they essentially communicate.
So coming from this, and these are some questions coming in from the audience. If I'm coming in from either a graduate degree or my postdoc, something in academia, I'm coming straight from academia. What is your best advice? Like, what role am I targeting? Is there a place for me directly in the regulatory team? Do I enter through a different path?
Well, I can start off that, and I can tell you that I don't think anybody grows up saying I want to be a regulatory affairs professional. Everybody somehow ends up either wandering into it because they're thrown into a small company and somebody says, I need this submission in, can you figure it out? Or they make a conscious effort to shift over after watching maybe regulatory affairs do something and saying, that's what I want to do. I see a lot of that. I see a lot of people transitioning from other functions, professional, like scientists that want to go into regulatory affairs, or quality people that want to shift over to regulatory affairs. And there's no clear pathway to do that. The first thing I would do is reach out to your regulatory affairs. If you're coming from academia, you don't have a regulatory affairs contact. If you're in a company, the first thing I would do is reach out to a regulatory affairs peer and express an interest in that, because then maybe they can involve you tangentially in some projects that might get you to feel what it's like. If you're coming from academia, I also teach, one of the things I also do is I teach at Northeastern University in the regulatory affairs department there. And almost the majority of the people in those classes are not regulatory affairs people. These are people that are in the lab. They're coming from somewhere else, or they're just college students that are working their way through their master's degrees. And what they ask me is, where would I start? And this may not appeal to a lot of people, but FDA is hiring. And the reason I say that is very simple. All right. FDA hires scientists and engineers. They learn by proxy what it's like to be in regulatory affairs. It's not the same role. You're not producing submissions for FDA to review, but you're learning about what the companies are doing. You're interacting with the regulatory affairs people. You're understanding the way the business is. If you're in the beginning of your career, or you're in sort of mid-career, that might be something you might consider, because that's a way to touch regulatory affairs without having to, find a way into a company, which sometimes can be very difficult. Otherwise, you have to take your skill set and then talk about how you analyze information, how you can think creatively, and translate that over to regulatory affairs skill sets. And I would do that by looking at what some of the job openings are for regulatory affairs. Just map your skills to that. That may sound like, resume and interview 101, but that's what I would do. I'd start to map my skills. One of the challenges that I find sometimes when we get scientists, and this was true when I came into FDA, they're thinking like scientists. That may sound weird or strange. Of course, they're thinking like scientists. They're scientists. But the regulatory affairs is not science. It's a regulatory science, but it's not science in that sense. It's not a pure science. So the regulations sometimes trump the science. And if you're so into a box about, well, this is what the science says, then you can get stuck, and it's hard to advance in regulatory affairs if you can't see beyond that to be creative in thinking about regulatory strategy. Because regulatory strategies are all about taking science, which has a lot of subjectivity into it, applying it to regulations, which also have some subjectivity in it, and making a case that the information that's before you is acceptable for approval of a product.
Yeah,
Would you say so? Go ahead, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can give you the example of one of the, so we are in the GMP manufacturing right now. And also my QC scientists also doing the R&D study for the stability study. So they are doing the stability study and came to me that, okay, can I use the uncalibrated pipette or this is just R&D study? So I was like, okay, so why are you doing the stability study? You are doing the stability study to increase the shelf life. And that is a GMP because that will allow to the final product. So even though you are doing the R&D study, the mindset should be, okay, no, I should use the calibrated pipette. I should use the quality components and the raw materials so I can produce the better result. I would say even the R&D should use all the calibrated instruments, or because whatever the results you are producing it, that will go to the quality control, and then how you're going to match it if you're not using the same instrument that what quality control is going to use it.
And I think, and if I could just add to that real quick, I mean, that's a great example. And what I would say from what you described, Poonam, is that it's the mindset, right? Of, don't ask the question, do I have to do X? Ask the question, why wouldn't I do X? Yeah. Because if I start asking that question, you begin to understand, you start answering the question yourself. Because if you don't have a good answer, the thing I tell everybody is, before you go to a regulator, convince yourself first, right? Don't go to a regulator and say, hey, I have this really good idea. I'm not sure it's going to work. I really have no clue, but please approve my product or my process. That's the worst thing you can do. So if you're sitting there and you're asking, for example, quality control, do I need to, validate this test? Can I just use a non-GLP or whatever the case may be? And you ask yourself, well, what am I getting out of that? And what am I going to do with this test in the end? You're probably going to answer the question yourself. That mindset, practicing that mindset, will help you transition from the research side or maybe the academic side to practical industry application and quality or regulatory. Yeah,
so another example is that we were doing the endotoxin testing. We have the 3 samples. The quality, if you're in the quality, you're supposed to write down all your components and all your instrumentation and everything. So one of the analysts, they used the cartridges for the endotoxin, the level is fine, but the other one, the third one, they used the wrong labels. So because they did not check it before they performed the testing. So the quality, you have to make sure that your stuff and every material and each and every component is fine before you perform the test. And I think this is a common sense. If you think about that even in our regular life, you check the food before you eat. You don't. You can see the food. Yeah. You cannot see the instrument. So instrument you have to check for the calibration.
So a lot of questions coming up on how to reflect that in a resume. Like, are there skill sets, are there courses? How do you demonstrate? And a lot of this is coming from people coming out of academia with no industry experience or little industry experience, or kind of in that early R&D space where maybe they haven't really interacted or been adjacent to regulatory and quality mindsets and values and interactions, right? How do you indicate when you look at a candidate, or you look at a potential applicant or a CV of some sort, what are some things you look for whether it's a course or some kind of, skill sets highlighted. How do you show that in the initial stages of a?
So for the quality control, I would like to prefer, if they're coming from the academic or R&D, that's fine for the quality control. There are analysts, research scientists that they can join. But I'm looking for if they think that they have attention to details, they have like a skill set, basic skill set. If they have, like in the lab, they use the pipettes, they are documenting it, they use the PCR machine, they did the endotoxin, something like that. They work in the lab, so they know how it is. And you see the dynamic culture, definitely it's always on your toes, working hard every day from 9 to 5. You need to be on your toes. So if they think that they are ready, definitely that's the QC is the world for them. I would say some knowledge of the regulatory. If they don't have it, they can develop it while joining the QC. And I think that's it. I mean, teamwork, collaboration, they can develop all those things when they're going to start working in the QC.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say from regulatory affairs standpoint, so if you have a science background, that's really good for regulatory affairs. Doesn't have to be specific. For example, you don't have to be a chemist and go over to medical devices, or you're not stuck in the drug regulatory affairs world simply because you were a chemist. That doesn't, that translates across a lot of background, but the idea is you have that scientific mindset. You can think through those things. And by the way, there are a number of regulatory affairs people out there who are English majors too. So it's not like you have to have it, but having that background allows you to work well with development teams. That's the key here. The thing I would say I look for in regulatory affairs, because like I say, besides the number of schools that are more and more schools starting to have a regulatory affairs curriculum, besides that, as a demonstration that you have the basic background, without experience, I have to, be honest with you, there are a lot of, hiring snobs who basically will say, you don't have medical regulatory affairs background. What you have to be able to do when you come in is for example, I have hired non-traditional regulatory affairs people throughout my career. My first job, like I said, I had to build a team of people, and I was looking for people with combination product experience. There weren't very many people in the whole industry that had that. So I said, well, where's my weakness in this area? It's in drugs. So I hired somebody with a drug background. This person was a regulatory affairs person, but nonetheless, they didn't have the specific background in the area I was looking at. Another person I brought into my team, she had some background in both devices and regulatory affairs, but again, I was building a medical device regulatory affairs team. She came from the drug side. The keys with the main functions that I would mean, like skill sets I would look for in somebody in regulatory affairs, good people skills. It's hard to find that in an interview, really. I mean, everybody's going to be on their best behavior, right? But you're trying to figure out, what have they done? What activities have they done that show they have good people skills? What do they do when they disagree with somebody? Everybody's going to say, oh, I'm a collaborative person, and they all say that. But what really can you say? Like, I want to hear you say, occasionally I want to hear you say, like, hey, I remember one time I got into an argument with a guy, and during that time we kind of had a good discussion. I dug into what was his issue, what are the interests that we have to serve. Let's figure out how we can resolve this together. And I might have to come a little late. You might have to come a little late, but let's work on it. I want to get real conversations and understand what really happens and what do you do in real life situations. So people skills is big in regulatory affairs. Being able to understand you don't have all the answers, so you might be really smart, but this is an area you're coming into where you don't necessarily have the background. So how do you work through difficult things that you might not know the answer to? I want to understand what you do in that circumstance, and really just do I think you're going to fit into the team? That's the only other thing I might be looking for.
Okay, that's very helpful. So kind of on the quality side, a lot of attention to detail and kind of very methodical thinking, step by step, not jumping steps, making sure things are ticked off before you move to the next step type thing.
And analyze what you're doing it.
Right, and why, and knowing the why and adhering to that process. And on the regulatory side, really, it sounds like kind of being able to communicate with different people from other different departments who have different, motivations or backgrounds for that one project. I think that's very helpful. Quite a few questions came through with that. And there's one that also keeps repeating for the quality side, so QC primarily. Do jobs typically appreciate or value the Lean Six Sigma belt accreditation or certification? Does it help you or in any way promote you?
Definitely. If you have the certification, it will definitely, bump up your resume.
Okay.
And some of the companies definitely start asking now for it.
Okay.
If you do not have the certification, some kind of experience, that will help too.
Okay. And the kind of question of the current climate of, are you more immune to layoffs than someone in the R&D sector, for example, within your departments?
I think the quality control is the first one that they let it go, because the product is not, they are not releasing the product. The quality control is what the quality control will do. So, but
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
in
Go
today's
ahead,
world,
please.
yeah, go ahead. Tony.
No, finish your thought, please.
In today's world, I think you have to be ready for anything. And if you're in the quality control, you work hard, you release the product in the market, and that will really give you the satisfaction when you release the product in the market. But in the meantime, you have to be ready for if the product is not gonna work and then continuously released.
I would say, the quality control and quality affairs groups probably are a little more immune than regulatory affairs. And I say that because even though it's important to get a product approved by, FDA, having submissions going to FDA, the regulatory affairs may be broken up into therapeutic areas. And if they're broken up into therapeutic areas, that means that they might have product managers in the regulatory affairs group. So for example, I'm working on a particular product, particularly say drug product. Well, if that doesn't do well, I might be gone, because me and my team that are working on that, they may say, we don't need this drug anymore. We're not interested anymore. And even though they may try to move you around in the company, more often than not, they just say, it's just easier to, we wish you well. Here's a package, good luck. I will say that I've been fortunate, but I also recognize that I'm not immune to anything. But being the only medical device regulatory team in those pharma companies does give you a little bit of safety, because they know how hard it is to find people that will, first of all, come to a pharma company if you're in a medical device world, but also have that combination background, both drug and device, understanding of both of those, and biologics as well. It makes you a little more protected, but nobody's 100% immune. And you should always keep in mind, everybody's expendable. If the CEO can go, all right, I don't need to finish that sentence. All right. But I would say the best way to make yourself a little bit more bulletproof is to have a broad understanding, cover a lot of products, and embed yourself such that it makes them really, really hard for them to move you out of there without really negatively impacting some aspect of their business.
Agreed 100%. Working with the different product lines definitely help.
And quality, right? Quality goes across the board.
Yeah.
But that's not always true for regulatory.
Right.
So this is I guess a related question, actually. How do you keeping relevant by expanding your breadth of experience with different types of drug classes or drug products, right? Have kind of the requirements for each of these job functions, have they changed a lot in the last few years? Do you find there are new things you have to keep up with in some way, kind of follow certain trends in industry? And what do you do to do that? What do you do to kind of keep yourself updated?
I'll start if that's okay. You definitely, the basic requirements of the job, I don't think change all that much, at least on the regulatory affairs side. But the trends in the industry definitely change. One of the big ones right now is AI, right? AI is used in products, right? For like example, medical devices, they use AI in the digital health world, right? To treat patients, maybe even embedded in products. They use it in the quality side, right? Manufacturing. They're using AI, and there's a lot of questions around, how do you do that? What does that look like? Are they really producing outcomes, better outcomes? So that's an example of a trend that is a mega trend that's affecting not only medical devices, really affecting the entire world, but it also by proxy, it's also affecting the life sciences as well. But also individual regulations change, right? So we had a regulatory intelligence team in the larger companies that were looking at all of that. And if a change would come through, they'd have to then notify the people and make sure that change, whenever it becomes effective, we're ready for it. So, and if you're one person job, like a person like I have been before, that's a big ask when you're working in a global company and they might be in 100 countries in the world. So that can be a real challenge. Absolutely. But I would say the basic requirements of what a regulatory affairs person has to do hasn't really changed that much. But you might find in some companies, for example, they look at regulatory affairs as, here's a product, please get that approved, right?
Yeah.
Almost like a mailbox. Let's move the submissions out, bring them back in. And they don't really necessarily look at regulatory affairs as a strategic partner. I think that has pretty much changed throughout the industry. That's one big change that has happened, where regulatory affairs has become a critical strategic partner in the entire process of development. And you may find people at the C-suite level, chief regulatory officer, for example, that is actually demonstrates the strategic vision of the company for regulatory affairs.
Do you typically find that in companies where the product, whether it's a device or a drug product, is a newer class?
No, I think it's just the way the company views regulatory affairs.
Right.
Yeah, same with the quality control. The testing is same. The how you do it is different now. So, for example, in the microbiology, when I started, we used to make the media, plate the bugs, and then do the testing all manually. Nowadays, you can buy the pre-plated pre-made plates, and also the powdered plates that you can just plate the bugs and then it's ready to go. So it also depends upon when I started I started doing the PCR, but now there are qPCR, ddPCR, so many different types. So you have to keep up with the instrumentation, but the test is same.
Mm.
And like if you look at submissions, for example, the requirements of what goes into a submission, not from the technical side, but the general formats of submissions, they basically stayed the same. They've made them into electronic formats to make it easier to submit, right? And one thing that can't be sort of digitized is a regulatory strategy. You have to have that mindset to be able to create the strategy, which is really what wins the day. Even if the science is great, if you don't have a good regulatory strategy, that's all going to fall on its face. So basically they're asking for the same general information, forgetting for a moment the individual technologies, but the way we do that, the processes we use have been modernized.
On that note too, so someone has asked, do you currently see a role or an opportunity for data scientists, machine learning scientists, AI scientists within these functions, or do you foresee that it's becoming, there will be a need? So do you currently see it now where there's kind of an opportunity for someone like that to support in these teams, / do you see it kind of coming up on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you right now, there's absolutely a need for them. I had a conversation with a gentleman just about 2 weeks ago who was transitioning. His whole career was data science in the military. And he was like, I want to, I want to get away from this. I want to do something different. I'm talking to a whole bunch of people. I want to know what's out there in life sciences. Well, we just talked about it a few minutes ago, AI and manufacturing, right? AI and product development. There are all types of opportunities in life science for data scientists and, people that are in that space, AI, machine learning. Absolutely, I would say. And not only that, but it's always been, I'd say maybe the last 10 years or so around big data. I'll use that term, looking at molecules and using data science to sort of find those targets and the molecules that work with them. So it's always kind of been there, but it's growing even more with AI and ML, I would say.
Yeah, I have a data scientist in my team because we produce so much data that analysts cannot perform and then analyze it.
Mm. Yep.
So there is always an ETS.
How can project management facilitate or contribute to regulatory quality roles? I guess as a skill set. Is there a kind of, how helpful is it? A lot of the questions coming in are, how do I highlight, what type of skills do I highlight in my resume that help to kind of communicate across the things you're saying are important for for your function, right? Your team functions. How do I get that past to hiring manager who's scanning my CV, in 10 seconds or so? Project management, teamwork, communication, attention to detail. What are some things you look for that demonstrate or quantify that? Clearly a very analytical population today.
Well, I'll just say in project management is a huge role in every company I've participated in. Some of them, there's an entire project management function. I'm using project management as an example. There's a project management function, and their entire jobs are to make sure that whenever there's a project, which you can define it differently, it gets tracked and that it's monitored, and that person pushes, drives the end result of that project. Regulatory affairs and quality, and everybody communicates with at least in the roles I've been in, with the project management team, to make sure that all the elements are captured, right? Because that person will not probably know everything. I'm certain they won't.
Yeah, I would like to add the problem solving abilities that is very important for the quality, and also the should have a mindset for the continuous improvement that you learn something new always. So going with that mindset, and I think and whatever Tony explained.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the people skills come across, right? All of that.
All of that, yeah.
Yeah, but mostly you see that in an interview, right? That's where you get a sense. If you're kind of an a early career person, and maybe you have some adjacent regulatory skills that you can highlight, but maybe you don't, but you do you've run projects, whether it's in academia or in another job, where you've talked to many different people, many different stakeholders from different departments. Like I think a lot of the questions are, how do I, what tangible, what specific things can I put at the forefront to show you before I get interviewed, so that I do make the interview phase, that I have some of the skills or interest.
I think the regulatory and the quality, they always
I'm gonna go get my Remicade Saturday, but I'll be home for your appointment.
Sorry, I think someone.
I'm gonna get my.
Okay, I found the person.
Okay. Yeah, so like quality control collaborates on the regular basis with the manufacturing team. If the production is going on, if the team is in the research mode, they collaborate with the research team, the regulatory affairs, quality control, supply chain logistics, and also the senior management. So including in the resume that you can collaborate with the different people, different teams is definitely helpful. And then also describe what projects are in there.
Okay.
And I'll also add that, if you're coming in as a junior regulatory affairs person, it's a lot easier, because, there are regulations that you learn over time, but you don't have to be a encyclopedia of regulations. You just need to know where to go to get them, and you need to know how they work together so that you're bringing a coherent picture of the product and the development of the product, and, you know, its testing and all of that into one, you know, coherent picture. If you're coming in as a junior regulatory affairs associate, for example, it's a lot easier to sort of say, you know, you've got some skill sets that we can build on, and we can teach you the rest. As you try to target more senior roles, they're looking at, will you have credibility among the team, right? You're coming in from a role you've never had in regulatory affairs. You're leading a whole bunch of people who maybe have done regulatory affairs for 20 years. What can you bring to the table? Well, I might just be a good manager, like a great leader. Then show that. You need to show that you've done that. Show where you've come into a role where you did not know the technical aspects, but you led that team, and they followed you, and you created great results, and didn't leave the whole team in ruins. I mean, those are things you need to be able to show. I'm in academia, especially if you're a professor, a tenured professor, you've got a lot of, let's be quite honest, politics under your belt, which means you know how to interact with people, which means you know how to get things done, which means you know how to negotiate. All those are important skills at the more senior level. So, you know, you just have to basically say, if I take away all the technical stuff I do, what am I really trying to bring to the table every day? That's what you want to be able to bring to the surface when you're trying to get into these roles.
And just a quick note for the audience, kind of really wanting to get a better idea of skills you can highlight, etc. Sometimes that summary narrative, you know, that 2-3 sentences up top is really the place to communicate some of these things, and that's where you capture people's attention. I mean, we always say to tailor that section depending on the role that you're applying to. And that's, you know, I think in roles like this, where you need to see mindset and you need to see methods of communication, clarity of communication, etc., that's a big part of oftentimes where we see hiring managers decide to read further or not, right? That's kind of, so to play to that section. And coming to an end, I think one last question. A couple of people have asked about visa sponsorship and the kind of chances of roles within these functions in either larger or smaller companies. How likely is it for someone, for kind of, what's the opportunity for visa sponsorship in some of the companies you've worked in your quality and regulatory functions?
You want to start?
Yeah. So when I joined it was like in 2006. It was fine. It was not that many of the questions, like, okay, if you want to come on the H1 and then something, then they can spend sponsorship. But nowadays it is really getting difficult. They ask in your application that if you can work under any employer, or you have to have a visa sponsorship. So that kind of a tricky, that especially the startups, they are not sponsoring any visa or any, they are not having, they prefer US citizen or H1 who can work under any employer.
Lower risk process for them.
What you said?
It's a lower risk process for them.
Yeah, it is. They don't want to go in the sponsoring the visa and all that hassle.
Yeah. From our experience, we've seen, unless there's a candidate with kind of very specific regulatory experience or quality, or a very senior quality person that they really want to bring in, it oftentimes is a case by case basis, and usually for very new drug classes or very specialized situations where they need that individual to already have that skill set. If they can't find anybody else, then they will consider it. So similar to what Buddha was saying, it's less likely these days than it was.
Yeah, it is getting difficult.
Yeah. All right. I think that kind of, you know, I think concludes our session. Any last words for someone in the earlier phase of their career interested or intrigued, you know, in that first job being either within quality or regulatory? what's the kind of biggest learning or one piece of advice you'd like to give them from each of you?
Yeah, I would just say, start making connections. I mean, like, it's like any other job, having connections helps. If you're in a regulatory affairs curriculum, talk to your professor, instructor. I've had my students reach out to me and say, I want to go into IVDs, for example, in vitro diagnostics, and I don't know anything about it, but I worked in a chem lab, and I would connect them to people I know that worked on IVDs, and I've had them reach out to those people. That's kind of the way I would expand my network and see what you can do there, but also what we talked about earlier around framing your skills.
Or would you recommend that be your first job coming into industry, or would you recommend you come through a different function first and kind of,
It's easier, I think, to come from another function, honestly, if you don't have any experience. But if you're coming in as a junior person, like I said, it might not be that difficult, as long as you've got a background, some kind of degree that they really think is going to help them.
Yeah. And I want to add that don't limit yourself to apply to, if you're working for the food industry, to apply for the dietary supplements or microbiome or any other industry. Go ahead and try your luck, and then and don't be scared if you are in the academic, you cannot apply for the quality control or R&D or QA. Go ahead and apply. You can learn things when you're going to be in there. It depends upon the manager to manager what they are looking for.
Good advice. Thank you so much, both of you, for the time that you have taken, voluntarily to kind of spend with us today and help address the early job seeking population who are interested in those functions. We really appreciate it. And on behalf, to the audience, to the attendees who've again also taken the time to come and ask your questions bravely, I think, good first step. Go out there and make connections and kind of have conversations like this in person. Be respectful of people's time, but be brave and have these conversations. And I think you'll find you'll get a lot of insight and a lot of first ideas of how you can get that first role. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.